Open that up? Oh, you're gonna chop, oh, very technological.
I know.
Okay. So Sarah, you were talking about art before, and since you are a functioning, working artist who actually has been paid for some of your stuff.
Surprisingly so.
Yeah, although I was recently paid, somebody bought the $3, um, she's gonna be happy to hear this. Some good friend, old former student of mine, bought the $3 Down in the Shaman from Amazon and played it,
Oh,
couldn't put it down for the whole weekend.
Wow.
Yeah, Mary, but she's a special being, okay? And she did the whole thing and then she actually liked it. So, and I know she liked it from the point of view of the story, because she said, I wanted to find out what was gonna happen next.
That's now your #1 best-selling book.
That's my
for you.
bestseller.
Yeah.
I don't know what I get out of that.
A coffee,
Yeah.
a small from Starbucks. So
So, okay,
Probably enough to cover like the day of internet that it costs
Yeah.
to get that.
might have covered the thumb drive that you put it
Yeah.
on.
Nah, that's still even like
No, it's-
$7-8.
Yeah, it's like $8, isn't it? Yeah, we gotta work on the
We'll figure it out.
expense portion of selling a thing.
I figure out,
investment.
when I try to go through the eye of the needle
Mm.
in the not too distant future, could happen anytime, I would hope that I don't wanna take anything with me, but I know that what I will take with me will not be the expenses, what it'll be the love of these and the care. That's the thing I would carry.
Mm.
And that's an inherited trait from my mother's side. So anyway, let's go back to art.
Yeah.
Mm.
I wanna hear what you said about art being, especially nothing is disconnected, everything is that, there's no such
Yeah.
thing as one thing apart. Even for definition and things like that.
Well, I guess I'll preface it just by what I had in that conversation, which is that the reason I respond to art so much, I suppose, and like the reason I've been drawn to it, I love language and reading, writing, semiotics in general, but my problem with it is when we use it to describe, we're using an already limited tool because language is something we as humans constructed, and it's very immediate and like mutually exclusive with its meaning. Like you can't change words suddenly to mean. It's much more black and white than visuals are. Pictures can change. You're just using a much more abstract medium to describe things. That's how I've found it to be, and it has a much better, or I guess just a much more open-ended platform I've found to be able to use to be used. To
So
describe.
art is more finite in the ability to define things, or more precise.
You're closer to it,
Yeah.
Art is more focused, individualized, but as Sarah implied outside, it's all connected to one, so real good art becomes an archetype, it becomes something that resonates deeply in the lives and the minds of people, because it evokes something deep and a truth, and that truth therefore it has to be connected to the whole thing. So that's what great art
Yeah.
can do.
And I do think great writing can do that too.
Yeah.
And so that's my only point where I say I just think that a visual medium that, like, yes, we have the word for the color red, but there is no one defined term for what red does.
Right.
You know,
that's right.
everything is just so much more open-ended, and so it's almost, I mean, I used the description of trying to paint from a flat photo versus from real life. It's like you're just limiting yourself, I feel like, when you put it in the structure of words. And words can be really powerful, language can be incredibly powerful because these
reality.
symbols do have such weight. Like a word means something,
We
and
create
so
reality with our language.
yes, and so I respect writing because it's a game almost. You're
Yeah, well,
playing
that's
with
just
these
a game.
symbols,
Yeah.
and so I have a huge respect for that. And I'm not saying I don't. I love writing. You know, I read all the time, but I have just responded so much more to visual and fine art because I've found there's just it's so open, which is what can be scary about it too. But it's you're using so many more sensory things, especially interactive art or full installation art or
For
something.
me,
You can
almost
you can
all
do
art is
anything.
interactive.
Yeah.
And can I tell you, I'll give you my point of view, then I'll express it through an experience I had. Years ago, probably 20-ish or more, more than 20 years ago, I went with some friends and their daughter down to the vet and watched Swan Lake, because Billy, my friend's niece, was gonna dance her last dance. She was one of the dancers in Swan Lake. She's not the prima donna, the prima ballerina, but she was good. She had done it a long time, and her legs needed surgery because of all the tightening of the muscles, all the constriction of the, that's a terrible penalties to pay for being that way. So we went, and the prima ballerina had come down from New York, and she'd not even practiced with them. They just danced, and she did her thing. You know the thing, right? You've seen it. You know when at the break, there's a break. I don't even remember the story much. I don't think about it ever. But all I really care about so much is, I mean, and beautiful, excellent, the whole thing. But when she was doing she would start with here, she had a partner, and she'd start here, and she would unwind and unwind. I mean, amazing physical thing. Again and again and again and again, unwind and then go to a death, I think, I'm not sure. Forgive me, I don't know the story, even though I saw it. And I was so profoundly touched by that. I could feel myself wanting to cry. Now I know I'm a sissy, okay, I know that. But how come? Why? What did it touch? What did it mean? So I looked at it. It's obvious. I was in the museum in Santa Barbara looking at art, and I started to feel the same thing. Why? Because art is perhaps this is probably not anything new, the best expression of the best of us. I mean, you turn mystical experiences, put in the hands of the legalists, as Maslow said, and it becomes authoritarian, and it becomes patriarchal, and it becomes full of punishment, and in addition to the horrors and the suffering of the world, and nothing comes out of it. But art is I don't say it can't be corrupted. Look at Goebbels in Germany, but it can be the expression of the best of us, and it can touch that in us. Because this human condition is so problematic. I mean, I just drove down here, and a guy just drove out past a red light and cut in front of me, and I could have crashed into him, and a big truck, and then he took a left-hand turn without signaling, and I said, this is, a microcosm of the human condition. The human condition is like saying this to everybody else. So many people, and then there are people who can't do that, who can't feel that. And the reason they can is because they realize something deep. I mean, I've said this before, this little being, the star of this show, who's always here, I don't feel superior to her, and I'm not even for the jokes I make about the fact that I serve her like a princess, but not that. I mean, she's just a different kind of being, but we have one thing in common. It's a purity of consciousness. It's the same consciousness that the Maharaj talks about in I Am That. He said, you are not a person, he said to people. There's just this form, but this consciousness that I always claim arises out of the subatomic world. Where else does it come from, right? This consciousness that takes all kinds of forms, all kinds of sentience. Geniuses, mystics too, cows, turtles. This consciousness comes from the same place. So who's going to feel superior to anything else in any sense? And we all have one thing in common that should just totally convince us that we're not superior. we all gonna come to an end.
Mhm.
This is gonna come to an end. The
So-
false personality will come to an end, the one that's made of memory,
Mhm.
but not the real you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm enough, I ranted.
So, what do you think about that? No more.
Yeah, I guess he asked earlier too, like the experiences that I had that freaked me out about life and stuff. Like what did that do to me as a person? And the same sort of thing with my art practice. And with that realization is it's like if everything that if our reality that we facilitated through language and through expectation of this very minute piece of living isn't in fact it, and it's also abstract and kind of untouchable, and that time will just continue on forever, and that we're like, just a little hiccup in it. That, I mean, it in a weird way made me selfish, at least in the sense of my time and what I want to do, and that sounds super, I don't know, cheesy and like, like even in my studio practice, I kind of had this moment of like, I'm just gonna do the things that I am so interested in, like the stuff that I gravitate towards, the stuff that intrigues me. I'm not gonna think too hard about what is being expected of me as far as like what is good art, what is contemporary art, what is being shown in other galleries. Like I've been down that road, and especially in school, it like completely
I don't
hindered
understand.
me.
How can you compete with through art? You
I
do
had-
your own
It
thing.
was difficult.
Yeah.
I was
I
gonna
mean,
get
it's,
into that.
it
That
is
was
a
actually
huge
the thing that I
competition.
wanted.
It's a massive
That's
Oh,
what
I
I
know
wanted
it
to
the
get
art
to.
world.
No,
Yeah.
human ego is always.
No,
gonna be-
right, but like it's
But,
all. I'll go into it after. Go ahead.
sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Finish. Yeah.
I was just gonna say. I mean, it's difficult to judge what art is better than another art because every concept that you're pointing out is a pattern that has been, I hate to say it this way, but I don't know how else to say it, fabricated and then put on some kind of hierarchical pedestal as to what is important, what makes good art and what makes bad art, and then of course breaking that rule can also make good art. So
Well, and so there's a huge argument that a lot of fine art and to know fine art is like a relatively elitist, highbrow thing because you have to have had at least a basic art history, like background to understand why a painting with a single red line means anything, or why you have no context as to why any art meant anything back at that time, and like a lot of these things actually have massive historical, social, political like weight. And so I would actually argue, like, I mean, my whole education was about figuring out what was good art and what was bad art,
Right.
and I really do think that there is, I mean, you've heard me even critique different art and art practices, and I think all artists are gonna make bad art. I have no objection to people making bad art. It's people's opinion of their bad art and whether or not they have the eye to be able to tell that what they're making is, like, I believe the process has to be incredibly experimental. And I had, this was the thing I was going to say earlier when I lost my train of thought. I had a professor my junior year of Pratt, and I'm going to give her a shout out if she ever watches this, Mona Brody. It actually was my sophomore year, that's why it was a big deal. I had Mona Brody for painting processes, which was like a junior senior level course, and I had switched in late and had missed the deadlines for all of the prerequisite classes, and so my advisor, I switched my major. My advisor's like, yeah, we'll take one of the later classes and you'll take the prerequisites later, like when those were open again, because they were all filled. It was like 4 weeks into the semester. So I'm with juniors, seniors, and grad students in this painting processes class with Mona Brody as like a newbie sophomore, like just out of freshman foundation with grad students. Terrified. I was like, I'm not ready for this course. You're making your own oil paints, you're doing all this stuff. And like, these were kids who were full into their theses. So like, they were coming in with phenomenal works of art. And I'm like, I just finished foundation. Like, I had homework assignments. Like, I'm not ready. Like, it was like draw drapery for 12 hours. Like, I was not making art yet. Like, it was just sketching.
That's funny.
And so, yeah, so
You're
I
going
entered this
back?
class. Yeah, foundation is like the basic. They tell you day one, forget everything you've learned. We're going to start by drawing straight lines and circles. And
Okay.
you go from there. You don't shade until the
Sounds
second
good.
semester.
As
You
a-
only do line drawing
As a
until.
former educator, I recognize the value of that.
Yeah. So I go into this class. So here was my whole point. I go into this class being like, what the hell do I make? Like, this is the first class where I'm really being challenged to like, it's like make whatever you want. Or just use your own the oil paints you just made, or use the pastel sticks we just made, or use the paper we just made, or we had to do a performance piece for one of our like final things, and I'm like, excuse me, like I don't do that, you know. So anyhow, I went to her like a few weeks in, like horrified, because I'm like, I can't. Like I just genuinely don't know what to make for this class. Like I don't have an assignment. Like I can make the supplies, but I was stuck. And she told me something that has stuck for a very, very long time, and it's just the sentence of, if you're not making honest art, you're not making real art. And I was like, well, what's honest art? And it's that exact thing where it's like, if there's any subliminal, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Influence, I guess, that didn't come from you, that wasn't a genuine interest and exploration coming from you, you will never understand that concept that you are now creating art about to the fullest to be able to make good art about it. Because you came in from the side being like, oh, this is trendy, this is contemporary, this is something I saw off Tumblr, this is what everyone else my age and race is doing, like whatever it is that you're fitting into, immediately you've gone down the wrong path. And I mean Pratt's motto is be true to your art and your art will be true to you. And I always thought that was the goofiest thing, but then it was this moment of kind of like, shit, that is really what she's telling me to do, is like, if it's not purely authentically you and honest, and that was her thing, is she's like, if it's not honest art, it's not.
Could I suggest something for people? I know there are only a couple of people to see this, but there's three, yes.
3 viewers.
Roland, Sarah.
Many
and
subscribers.
Many subscribers. 20. But they don't bother to.
I think. I gotta check.
Anyway, because I am so far back to the basics, and I have been since before I wrote my doctoral dissertation, which really rested on body consciousness. Some people might think, oh, that's a lower point of view, body, body, no, you gotta talk about the highest ideals. You know, I found the passageway from body consciousness to universal consciousness. And I've said this before, Ken Wilber, the great Ken Wilber in the Spectrum of Consciousness, said the very same thing my doctoral dissertation concluded with, which was 20 years before I read his conclusion. He said, unblocked organismic consciousness, unblocked body, no repression, nothing that's hidden anymore, is cosmic consciousness, he said. And I said the same when I called it universal consciousness. But I need not go through that. What came out of that, and I think of Einstein, who used to say that he used to feel his insights before they came up. He has to feel them in his body. I would suggest if people want to get in touch with the true, the authentic, the honest, as you called it, pay attention to your feelings in your chest. That's the heart chakra. You open it up and you're allowing the emotion to come through, and your heart chakra is the best emotion. And without the heart chakra, all the rest of the chakras are crap. It's the lever.
Yeah.
It's even called a fulcrum. I called it that in my book. So pay attention to this, and then you'll see your own authentic come up.
Yeah.
Just pay attention.
Well, and that even ties into sort of what we were talking about earlier, where I had said like this real this horrific realization of just like nothing means anything and time is like that whole crazy realization made me kind of realize of just like I just have to go towards the things that make me feel good right now, and like not like I'm not just gonna sit and eat cake all day, like, but I'm gonna let myself have cake once in a while because like fuck it, life's too short, it's like I like being outside, so I'm gonna pick to be outside all the time. I like to do art. I like to touch tactile things. I completely gave up painting because I found something. I went to school for that, and I'm not doing it, you know. But it's but that's influenced the thing I'm doing, obviously. But it's like, I was even told, I respect the hell out of my thesis teacher, but she told me not to do the textile stuff. Like I've told you that. She told me it had been done before, and it wouldn't be new or exciting. It wouldn't. It it was a bad direction, and to stick with the cut paper and the painting stuff, and that stuff is fantastic too, and I will probably go back to it.
You do other stuff.
I'll probably I'll go back to that stuff
I
too.
can picture you teaching someday.
It can be a driver, which is interesting, right? That challenge thing of like, well, I've learned all this stuff from this teacher, and now they're saying I shouldn't do this thing. And you're like, yeah, but I can make it better than what they're conceptualizing. Right,
Yeah.
It can be a driver. It can, you know,
Well,
out of that small little blip of.
It was such a gut thing where immediately I was just like, and with a lot of respect, I was just in my head. I'm like, no, you're wrong.
Right.
And it was instant, and I was just
Right.
like, I have to go with my gut. Like,
Right.
like I respected her opinion like crazy too. She gave me a lot of good advice.
Oh, not
I
robots.
picked her as my
So-
thesis teacher.
Not robots. I mean,
Yeah.
no teacher is going to have every single answer. Certainly, they
Yeah.
can only show you the
And-
limitations of
and
the things that they
What I
understand.
had done
right?
up to that point was not good. So I see that why she had looked at what I had done thus far and been like, no.
Right.
Because the other work I was doing as my senior college thesis was obviously much farther along. Like that was work that was maybe 2 months old as far as a concept. And so I was just like, look at this cool thing I just discovered, but is still really ugly and like hasn't been figured out yet. And so yeah, as a college thesis professor, she's like, nah, you're gonna show this other stuff. And I'm glad she told me that. It was the right thing to show for my thesis.
I don't know if I should ask this on camera because it'll become like a therapy session, only I'm not gonna be curing anybody of anything, just opening doors to the boogeymen.
Open
What-
doors.
I heard you say, you know, how the realization made you can use different euphemisms, more self-interested. There are other ways to speak of that too, good ways. But what did you do with the suffering of the world? You were aware of that. How do you guys deal with that? I can't cover it the way I used to. Personally, you know, you get old, your hormones drop, all kinds, you become more and more,
Yeah.
you know, you become an old lady in a sense, you become the people that, you become both male and female in your emotionality, you become much more sensitive. I mean, the way I love these dogs is absurd, you know, but I don't need to go into that. But you become more and more aware of how terrible the world is. Jesus said it, the Buddha said it.
How it traps.
What do you do with it? How do you guys deal with it at this time? You take your mind off it, you go to other things, you function in projects.
She was talking about the happiness thing.
I go
leaning
towards
into
the
the happiness.
thing that just like if a situation just in general, I'm like, this makes me feel awful. These people make me feel awful. I'm like, I'm just not gonna be around them then.
Yeah.
And I don't mean them any animosity or hatred. I don't wish any ill will on those people. I'm like, I choose not to be around you because I don't feel good, and I feel great over here. So I'm gonna go be over here, or here. Like I literally, it's as simple as that for me. And it's like I'm sure I'm pissing off people, but I don't really care because I'm like I just have to do. I mean, seeing how quickly things can change or how quickly your life can be taken away, like just how quickly things can be taken away, that it's like if you have them there in front of you and you have the opportunity to do it right then and there, why not just do it right then and there?
Yeah.
And that's where I say like the selfishness is kind of, it's why I've traveled
Hey,
so
at
much,
least you came to a
like,
conclusion. I didn't. It staggered me. What do I do?
And-
that was, you know, destroyed.
It's funny because Sarah and my opinions of the things to do and the things that we find fulfillment in are actually polar opposites.
Yeah, that's right. You go to like.
I mean, but that makes sense that we would really enjoy being around each other because we drag each other into each other's
well,
worlds.
it makes and if we're gonna get super real on this podcast, it's because look at our two traumas. They're very similar, except mine was a huge accident that came out of nowhere where he didn't have enough time and didn't get to do the stuff he wanted to do.
Right.
Yours was brought on because he didn't take care of himself and slowly died. So
Right.
you now are super regimented and work out like crazy and enjoy it because you feel like you are taking control of your life. Whereas my traveling gives me the same exact feeling of I'm doing this now because I may never have time to do it again.
Right. Pardon
and
this
so-
brief interruption in the podcast.
Apologies.
Okay. Yes.
You know, and
so
so we're,
well, you
we're
take
fulfilling those
yeah, and you take
voids.
what I would guess is an Epicurean approach to it.
Well, yeah,
Kind of.
it
I would guess.
supports my love of art, and I picked travel because I love travel. I love the art. I love the food. I love the culture. The architecture I'm seeing is what I studied in school.
Mm-hmm.
The lifestyle just seems far more relaxed and focused on the things that matter, like enjoying the time that you have and enjoying your community and your family. And I can't imagine proposing U.S. Americans to take 2 hours from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. in the middle of the day to go hang out with your families and eat a huge meal.
That's what we're doing
Like, these
right
are
now.
business hours, you
That's
know.
what it's literally. It's tough. I'll tell you, as somebody that tries to operate inside of the economy the way that it is right now,
it doesn't fit with what I realize matters to me. And people are gonna say that it's very self-indulgent, but it's like I restrict myself in many other ways. But I don't know, if I'm not fucking happy, then nobody else around me is gonna be, and I think that's what a lot of people suffer from. I think everyone's just unhappy and treating everybody terribly. Because I think
When you're unhappy, though, in the past, I think I've seen you just try to be familiar with people, and I've seen that.
to see what with people.
I've seen your friendliness, and it's a strong expression of friendliness to oh hi, that kind of, and there's a smiling and a laughing. You probably were suffering inside very much at that time. So I've seen that in you. You have made your effort. You have not just been a hedonist. And by the way, it's not Epicurus who was the indulgent one. No, Epicurus had the garden. He would invite very calm and tranquil and thoughtful friends, and they would sit with him in the garden, and they would eat tiny morsels of food, and they would whet the appetite so as to appreciate, but they would never overindulge. Everything was refined. He was so beloved, and cities mourned when he died, not just his city. Now, the guy you're thinking of is Aristippus. He was John Belushi in Animal House. Aristippus, just stuff it all into your face as much as you possibly can. I don't think you were that bad, but you were somewhere in between.
Honestly, no, though. It was much closer to the first one where, I when I travel, I stay in a hostel, first of all, so I'm living in a bed with 30 other strangers, and my breakfast is usually free at the hostel. I go to the grocery store and get I'll go to the market and get little tiny things that look amazing that just make me want to die because they're so beautiful. And then I go get a bag of lettuce from the grocery store that's 70 cent euro, however you call it, cents in euros. I don't know I guess just 70 cents. I don't know.
No, it would have been $1.
Somebody educate us on these things.
It would have been $1. The euros come down from $1.
I just meant whatever the cent, the actual cent.
What a whole
penny?
A quarter pound.
Or
something.
Pounds is British.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. But I'm saying a quarter euro.
It was 50 cents. It was 50 cents. Yeah. But anyhow, so it's but then I'll spend I'll go. I love trying very specific things to that region. So I'll splurge on little teeny tiny things here and there. But then my dinner will be $1 bag of lettuce.
A quid?
No, that's British. The euro,
Wrong currency.
Your knowledge of
that's the
international politics has a hole to it.
That's
the
only. How many times have I been there?
I know.
Italy.
Well,
for
and Spain.
and Spain. Well, yeah, but that was at the same time, and then
went to London. You're one.
And then London. So, yeah.
Well, that's why you've got the British currency in your mind. I don't have currency in
If I could interrupt this conversation about high finance.
Yeah.
I was told by one of our attendees that I never look at the camera.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we probably. none of
Yeah,
us
I
do.
never look at the camera when I'm talking, and she chided me for it.
Mhm.
I'm
It
fine,
has
right?
to be encouraged
Yeah.
for us to fit into.
And I say it's only because I'm having a conversation with you,
Right.
you guys, and I'm not a salesman. But I know she's
Eventually, I
right.
will get a camera that focuses on him.
Mhm.
Eventually.
We'll have a crew. We'll have a camera
Maybe
crew.
if we can figure out how to actually produce some economic value for this, we can put some energy into the setup.
Yeah.
You know, we'll figure it
Yeah,
out eventually.
yeah, I think I have to rely on what I used to call serendipity. Things just happen,
Mhm.
and I'm just hoping something will happen because I'm capable only of having a conversation with you and writing. And yeah, I can still write.
Yeah.
But anyway, by the way, I have all my all 6 books on flash drives. After you showed me, I did it a few more
Promotional
times.
material right here. If anybody that is going to meet up with my uncle would
He
like
may
to
get
read
a-
those things,
And they get
He has
a
them.
flash drive handed to him. With
perhaps
4
he could
kilobytes.
take a tip for these books that he spent years building, creating, crafting,
Now-
refining.
Now, Marianne really liked The Don and the Shaman, and you know how it reads, right? You heard half of it read to you.
Yeah.
And you never
I
how it
never-
go,
I never
how-
finished,
you
yeah.
didn't know how it ended, but you saw it, and it just flows, right? It just it unra- like a wheel, it rolls. But I don't consider it my best book.
Mhm.
No, I don't.
My favorite was Mirrors, or whichever the
You
one that I was
read
reading.
part of Mirrors.
I
didn't
read
you?
most of it. I had like 50 pages left. Yeah, I read
Oh,
most
you don't
of
know how Teresa ends it.
it. I got rid of
I think you're
those.
gonna like it.
Yeah,
Your doctor, your Mr. Hyde will like
Yeah.
how Teresa
Yeah.
ends that book.
Yeah.
And I like the way I ended it too. I think it was a masterpiece right at the very end. Should I tell how I ended it in the last?
Yeah, definitely. You should definitely
I should tell
ruin
the
it. Ruin it for
No.
everyone watching. Yeah, 100%.
No, not the whole
No.
thing, just the last 3 lines.
Read the book.
yeah.
Okay.
No.
Read the book.
I love the
Put
way
the
I
effort
ended
in.
Yeah.
You know, I put my German Shepherd in there. I often put my German Shepherd in the my books. And he was in there, and a different name. I called him Sneaky Wolf. And that's a combination of my shepherd and Michael's shepherd. They called him Nico. But after a while, they began to realize his real name was Nico, because you find him in all these sneaky 100-pound German shepherds sneaking into everything, and you don't even know it.
Oh,
It's
man.
just great.
That's
It's just
funny.
beautiful. Oh, goodbye.
So, back to our conversation about happiness and art.
Oh.
So, what do you think of artists that suffer their art and produce great works from it? What I know that may not work for you, but what of that? Like what?
What do you mean by suffer their art?
And the ones that can't figure out how to maybe make it work in terms of, during their lifetime they could never make sales on their art
Oh, you
and
mean
things
like
like
me?
that. I'm sure many artists, most artists
I
that
mean, you're looking at her.
right and
Yeah,
so,
no, it's pretty
and so
hard.
just to shine the light on it, it's like you may talk about it as if, hey, I just do all these happy things like tromp through fields with butterflies floating, and then I get tremendous inspiration and I finally make a thing that makes a sale. But what about the other side of that thing, the negative side of the thing? What do you think of those that have to deal with that side of the thing? Is it?
I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. You have to work a couple jobs usually, and
so it's there.
still, and you have to hustle your art. Like you have to constantly be. I mean, I would say get something like a cafe account, which is call for art entries. Put your art on there. It's calls. It's art calls all over the country, and so you like apply for shows, submit for shows, and it's gonna cost you. That's $10 to $50 a submission, depending on how much it costs. So I think
What
Kara's
kind of
is
art?
30.
Any kind of art?
Depends on what the shows are.
Oh.
Yeah, it'll be it's an account where you can choose, like public art or just sculpture, or just painting or photo or whatever, and
Well, how
it'll.
would you present a novel? How would that?
I mean, that's fine art. That's gallery art, fine
That's
art.
right.
It wouldn't be. Yeah, it wouldn't be right. It doesn't have writing. Or I mean, maybe it does, but I don't think so. But anyhow, yeah, I'd say like it's just about, you have to. I mean, if you're not willing to invest the time to promote yourself and have your website and pump your own
Right.
branding, then it's probably not going to happen. I mean,
Right.
I try to do it, and I still would say I barely made it.
Right. Pardon me for 1 second. My
Yeah.
alarm is going off. But go on. Yeah, keep going. I know there's more work in the background that you're not mentioning.
More, I mean, yeah, it's a ton of work. I have a studio. I stay up late. I'm working. I mean, it's less of like going to work and more of a, if I'm awake and breathing and I'm not doing something else, I'm working on studio stuff, which is why half of our living room still has weaving supplies and collage stuff. Like, it's literally everywhere. It's
Very appropriate.
at any second I'll be doing something.
If you had been working on your weaving, I call it weaving?
Yeah, it's weaving. It's tapestry weaving.
Yeah, your tapestry weaving, while we were having this conversation, would it have changed your conversation? It's always good, I always like watching you.
How do I know?
That's right, how do you know? Not the principles, you'd still, the same fundamental ideas would remain.
Yeah. I mean, I am pretty good about like paying attention. Those weavings don't take a whole lot of thought. When I step back, I think I've told you this every hour or two, and we'll like stop. Good Lord, I'll like stop and make a decision. I'll like look at the you know, what I have in front of me, and kind of make composition decisions, I'll make color decisions, and then make a plan and kind of go back into it and then work for a few hours. And so as long as I'm not,
Plan?
yeah, and so like as long as I'm not, and that'll sort of, it's a rough plan. So it'll be like, I'm gonna add this color down to this section and I'm gonna do it this way. But like things still become intuitive and just kind of go off on their own, but it's very, I put in very little thought once I actually start weaving. And so, so I can pay attention and listen pretty
I was bragging,
intently.
and in one of my emails with one of my favorite people, I was bragging that I don't really know what I'm gonna write when I start writing.
Mm-hmm.
But actually I do, I have a little, what you call planning, I might have an idea. I wanna get to this idea, so I let it just unroll. In the dialogue, since my whole world has been words, for decades and decades teaching. So the dialogue, I think people like dialogue, yeah. So there's quite a bit of dialogue. Human interaction is very important throughout all my books. Well, did we solve anything? Did we stop anybody from committing suicide? I hope.
I should get back.
Yeah, this thus concludes